What's up, weirdo? Shade Tree Surgeon here, once again in the mighty blue Honda Civic, on our way to try again to do a second Craigslist buy that hopefully involves much less drug and police activities than the first one did. That was a little dicey. I'll tell you, I actually, if you didn't see that video, it's probably the video that came out before this one.
Previously on X-Men.
His ex-old lady is dating the dude who actually owns the bike, and he's dating that guy's ex-wife, and he keeps them both in dope. He yells to his friend, "Get the angle grinder, we'll just cut the lock off." They're just leaving needles all over the place. Meanwhile, there's shirtless children running everywhere, and he stomps up to the shed and he goes, "Hey, this is private property. What are you doing in there?" Once the cops start showing up, it is time to exit stage left.
I actually had to downplay that story. Me and Flip were just like talking about it back and forth. Like, I made it seem not as crazy as it was because I was telling her, I was just like, this doesn't sound believable. Like, I'm not making any of this up. But it was bad. You had to be there. It was real bad. Anyway, this one seems a little bit better, a little more promising. We're once again going to look at what is probably the second cheapest running Goldwing on Craigslist in Florida. We're headed over to the other coast right now from Tampa. We're a little bit outside of Daytona is where we're gonna end up. And once again, just like in the first video, if you guys didn't know what's going on, is I'm trying to buy an inexpensive motorcycle, namely a Honda Goldwing, and ride it coast to coast, ride it cross country, and say that, hey, you can get a cheap motorcycle off of Craigslist if you don't get shot, arrested, or otherwise waylaid by drug-using maniacs in the bowels of the Florida swamps. You can do this. So it's fitting that since we're heading over to the other coast, I'm going to start it out by riding that motorcycle home coast to coast. Because if that motorcycle can't make it home, if it can't make it all the way across the state, from the first second I throw a leg over it, I don't want to buy it. See you guys in Daytona. So, last Goldwing didn't work out. We're going to look at another one because another person I had messaged me back while we were still on the road. So, now we're headed to, where was it? St. Cloud, Florida. And the people who own this Goldwing owned it for 30 years, they're claiming. So, maybe it's in a little bit better shape than the one we just looked at because that one, basically, under load, it was dropping cylinders. I think it had bad spark. And maybe that's something I would have tackled, but since the rest of the bike was in kind of rough shape, I felt like I didn't want to dig into that can of worms, so that had to be a pass. But let's go see what the blue Goldwing in St. Cloud is all about. Maybe we'll have a little better luck, even though it's got higher miles, 89,000. Fun for the whole family, Machine Gun America. Welcome to Florida.
We got a flat tire. Josh decided he can do this faster than me, so I let him take over. So is it going to hold, or?
If it doesn't, we will know very quickly. Let's try this another time. One more time.
A third time.
Third time's a charm, guys. Third time's a charm, like we said. The tire is patched. We have a real tire on there now instead of the donut, and we're heading back down to Naples, which was where we originally ran into the drug dealer and the feuding crackheads. If you watch that video, you know what happened. Anyway, back down to Naples to somebody else who seems much nicer, at least at first. Anyway, the Goldwing that we saw in St. Cloud didn't work out. It had 90,000 miles on it, which is okay for a Goldwing. They can go for really high miles, but the guy who had owned it for its entire lifespan almost, told me that he had never changed the timing belt and he had never changed the stator. And unfortunately, with 90,000 miles on it, I didn't want to risk opening that can of worms, so we had to pass on it. Anyway, here's to hoping. Third time's a charm. This will be the third Goldwing we've looked at today. We've probably traveled, what would you say, like at the end of this, we'll have traveled like 600 plus miles today. Ooh. But that's one of the things when it comes to buying a used old motorcycle is a lot of the ones you run into are going to be kind of crappy. So you can't just buy the first thing you see because it's right in front of you. You got to be able to say no and look at everything that's available and find the best one for the right price. So the one we're going to look at now is on the high end of what I want to pay, but the guy says that it runs like a top and he would take it across the country without thinking twice.
New tires.
And it has brand new tires. The other one with the 90,000 miles, the tires were absolutely roached. So
the tires alone make up the gas price.
The tires alone, it's worth the extra money that they're asking for this one. So hopefully the next time I see you, it'll be in front of a Goldwing that I own. Well, we're about 15 minutes away from the last Goldwing. The sun is going down. You can see it flashing on our faces over there. We've been on the road for literally, over looking at 3 different Goldwings today, probably over 12 hours on the road. We started at before 9 a.m. this morning. So it's been a long day, and we're going to look at the final wing. And if this one ain't it ain't gonna happen. We're going home. So me and Flip just went and looked at the last Goldwing. After a 700-mile trip, we finally said just one more. We're gonna look at one last bike, and obviously, maybe you can tell what happened because I'm standing here next to the car. Just kidding, there it is! Success! Shade Tree Surgeon is riding home on a Goldwing. And no, I've ridden about a half a mile up to the gas station. The guy I talked to seems super confident in the bike. He had a bunch of receipts for it for a lot of different things. I'll tell you guys about all that in just later on in the video, because right now, basically I rode it around the block, I took it here, I put gas in it, and I'm going to ride it all the way the 200 miles back to Tampa on the highway. And we'll see if that's the whole thing. If this bike can't make it back to Tampa, then I made a bad deal.
And the first song that comes on is Purple Rain. That's what I'm talking about, baby. All right. Here we go, Maiden voyage. Will it make it back to Tampa? Only one way to find out. Will it make it back to Tampa? I have absolutely no idea. I'm feeling pretty confident in the bike because I met the guy who was taking care of it. He had receipts for almost everything he had done to the motorcycle. It's one of those things that, yes, I actually paid a little bit more for this bike than I wanted to, and I'll go into why I did that in a little bit, but I feel like it was really, really valid reasons that is ultimately going to save me a lot of money in the long run. So I'm still in that really, really kind of easy, low price range, but with a bike that's going to be infinitely more reliable, and it had new tires on it. New tires. The amount of money I paid for it, I would have had to pay for tires alone on all 3 of the other motorcycles I looked at. Now I just got to come to terms with the fact that I now own a 1987 Aspen Cade Goldwing 1200. I mean, I'm in shock. This is ridiculous. What am I doing on this bike? Let's see. Let's make it home, and maybe we'll try to make sense of it after I'm back at home base. This is just absolutely Shade Tree Army to a T. A bike I've never ridden before. I just rode it around a neighborhood. I just bought it. Let's ride it 200 miles home and just see what happens. Okay, obviously the bike made it home. We're here at the next day with the Goldwing, and I'll show you guys. It's still a carbureted bike, so you still got to let it warm up a little bit, even though it is brutally hot out. But that was with no choke whatsoever. I'm sure a lot of you guys are wondering why the Gold Wing. Well, here's the thing. So when I said I want to buy a bike for $2,000 and I want to take it on a long trip, and specifically I want to take it cross country, although I might go up across the country instead of across the actual country. Yeah, you can buy a lot of different bikes that are probably run pretty well for $2,000. I feel like that has been almost a hallmark of my channel, as I've shown that. I show that all the time. But I wanted this specifically for touring. What I see a lot is people will buy a cheaper bike, a $2,000 bike. Maybe you just got it for around town. Maybe that's all you want to do. But I know a lot of people, they want to go on an adventure. They want to go far, and you can do that. You can certainly do that on a $2,000 bike that isn't necessarily set up for touring, but you're going to have to spend money to get it ready for that. It's going to be harder to do. So what I wanted to do with this bike is show that you can buy a nice touring bike for $2,000. I mean, this bike has 65,000 now. I've been riding it around. 65,000 miles on it. Everything works on it. It's perfect. The guy had all the receipts for all the work he had done to it, and for all the services that it had done. And I had to look through a few, that's for sure. It wasn't the first one I looked at. So don't expect that you're gonna just like go and the first Gold Wing you look at, if you want to do something like this, that is gonna be the right one. We'd look at 5 different bikes before we found one that I thought was worth the money. But they're out there. And everything on this bike works. It's comfortable. It is, besides the timing belt, which I'm going to change because the guy hadn't owned it for its entire life, and he had changed and rebuilt a lot of things on this bike, brake calipers and the clutch master cylinder and all sorts of stuff like that. But he has not changed the timing belts. And on Gold Wings, that's something that you do want to make sure gets taken care of. So I am going to change the timing belts on this bike. And then that's very cheap. You can, and pretty much anybody can do it themselves. It's a complicated job, but it's not necessarily very difficult. God, the torque curve on this thing is flat, the flattest thing I've ever experienced. You have all the power right from idle all the way up to the red line, and it never changes in intensity. It's just like, it's almost electric. It's bizarre. So here we are. This is the $2,000 touring bike challenge. When you think about $2,000, like, no, that's not free. $2,000 to a lot of people is still a ton of money. But when you think about how much that is compared to touring bikes, it's almost nothing. I mean, how much does a BMW GS 1250 cost, or a BMW K1600? You couldn't put hard bags on a BMW GS 1200 for less money than it costs to buy this entire motorcycle. Look at a fully tricked out Harley Davidson Heritage, all the bags, freaking Street Glide, and you know what? There are more chrome options. There are chrome options that add up to more money than you'd spend on this bike. You could get exhaust put on that bike, and getting the exhaust, buying it and getting it installed would cost more than this entire motorcycle. So here's this bike's competition. Most of the competition for this bike is in the $30,000 plus range. I mean, it's really crazy. Literally, let's say $25,000 and up. $2,000. That's what this bike costs, and we're pitting it against $25,000 plus motorcycles. When you stack this bike up against that kind of competition, it's literally peanuts. Like I said, exhaust and extended warranties cost more money than this entire motorcycles for its brand new competition. And here it is, 2Gs. This is what you get. And here's the challenge: is can you take a $2,000 touring bike from the 80s on a 5,000 mile adventure? What's up, Shelby? This is it. Just had to stop and show off the wing to the boys at the Ride Factory. Who knows? Maybe this will be a cool video series. I don't freaking know. I've been talking about it with my patrons, and they're all pretty excited about it. So if they're excited, I'm excited, because they're the ones who basically finance this channel, and they really want to see this happen. It's got enough acceleration to get out of its own way, that's for sure. We'll see. I'm pretty excited about it. I want to take this thing. I think the first trip on it is going to be to Niagara Falls. So Tampa all the way across the country, up instead of over. And I've never seen Niagara Falls. I want to stop in Tennessee and ride through the Smoky Mountains and come back through the Poconos and go on like a real proper touring adventure on this thing, like exactly what this thing was made for. I'm going to bring camping gear with me. I'm going to stop wherever I feel like it and just basically do it on a bike that costs $2,000 instead of a bike that costs $25,000. You know, I don't know. I think that's going to make for a cool series, and you guys know I'm all about basically trying to show people that you don't have to have all the money in the world to get into motorcycles. And I always say that, you know, you might be surprised at how cheap it is to get into motorcycles, and you might be really surprised at how cheap it is to get a motorcycle that does exactly what you want it to do. And how could I forget to mention that Shade Tree Surgeon on this completely stock 1987 Goldwing. I'm now officially a true S-Class hipster. Boys, I've made it. Top of the heap. The most hipster motorcycle you can buy, according to me. A completely stock 87 Goldwing, nothing done to it whatsoever, and the radio still works. That's about as hipster as it gets, in my opinion. But regardless of all that, I mean, of course, if you hadn't watched my hipster motorcycle tier video, you'll have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm really happy with this purchase. I really like this bike, and I'm really excited to have some awesome adventures on it. So until the big red wing returns, keep it weird, y'all.